Running late for her flight, the businesswoman noticed a beautiful homeless woman with a small child. Feeling pity, she handed them the keys to her country house. "I'm flying out for negotiations for 3 months. Stay at my dacha in the meantime." Due to difficult negotiations, the woman only returned half a year later. Remembering the homeless woman and her child, she drove to the dacha and turned pale at what she saw. Oksana Nikolaevna Ivanova ran a family business inherited from her father. By the age of 25, the responsibility for the company had already fallen on her shoulders. She dedicated her life to work and never started a family. Her only relative was her mother, who often reminded her how important it was to find a loved one, something that irritated her deeply. Oksana parked her black car by the house at exactly 11:40 p.m. Exhausted, she leaned back in her seat and closed her eyes for a moment. It had been a grueling day. Negotiations with suppliers dragged on until evening. Then she had to deal with a warehouse issue, followed by 2 hours reviewing quarterly reports. At 55, her body no longer tolerated such marathons. She glanced at her reflection in the rearview mirror, tired eyes, faint wrinkles at her temples, her neat hairstyle slightly disheveled by the end of the day. 30 years ago, when her father handed her the company, she had looked completely different, full of energy, ambition, ready to move mountains. Now, every day felt like a battle just to keep the business afloat. Oksana stepped out of the car, retrieved her briefcase from the trunk, and walked to the front door. The house greeted her with dim lighting in the hallway and silence. No, not complete silence. The faint murmur of the TV drifted from the kitchen. After taking off her shoes and hanging her coat, she headed there. As expected, her mother, Antonina Viktorovna, sat at the table. A half-finished cup of tea stood before her, her gaze fixed on the TV, where some health program was playing. "Almost midnight again, and you're just getting home," Antonina Viktorovna said without turning her head. Her voice sounded weary but carried unmistakable disapproval. "When will you stop torturing yourself and finally take a breath? Don't you understand that at your age, rest is important?" Oksana felt something tighten inside. The same thing every night. The same words, the same reproachful tone. She walked to the bar, took out a bottle of red wine, and poured herself a glass. "Enough, Mom." Her voice came out louder than intended. "I hear these reproaches every single day." Antonina Viktorovna finally looked away from the TV and turned to her daughter, her face showing genuine confusion. "What reproaches?" "I'm just worried about you. You work like a madwoman, never giving yourself a break. Have you ever thought about why things turned out this way?" Oksana interrupted, taking a large sip of wine. The alcohol burned her throat, but she didn't stop. "What do you mean?" Antonina Viktorovna straightened in her chair, and a wary look flashed in her eyes. Oksana set the glass on the table and crossed her arms. It was as if a dam had burst inside her. All the words that had built up over the years, all the grievances and unspoken resentments, came pouring out. "Did it ever occur to you that you and Dad are the ones who made me this way?" Her voice trembled with pent-up emotion. "You're the ones who tore me away from Arthur, claiming he wasn't good enough for me." She grabbed the glass and took another few nervous sips. The wine was starting to take effect, loosening her tongue and breaking down barriers. "Arthur?" Antonina Viktorovna repeated, surprise flickering across her face. "Good heavens, Oksana, that was over 30 years ago. He was just a poor student with no prospects." "He loved me," Oksana burst out. "He truly loved me. But you and Dad convinced me I deserved better, that he wasn't ambitious enough, that he had no future. We wanted a better life for you," Antonina Viktorovna began, but her daughter cut her off. "And then the next suitor was Dad's business rival," Oksana continued, her voice growing more strained. "Too ambitious, you said. He'll take everything from us, seize the company. Then it was too old, then focus on your studies, then your career comes first." She slumped into the chair across from her mother, tears welling in her eyes. And then I had to take over the company. Oksana's voice dropped to a whisper. Dad died, and everything fell on me. When was I supposed to meet anyone, when every waking hour went into keeping the business afloat? When I was working 14-hour days just to keep from destroying what Dad built? Antonina Viktorovna sat in silence, lips pressed into a thin line. Her fingers nervously twisted the edge of a napkin. Don't blame us for everything, she finally said, steel creeping into her voice. We always did what we thought was best for you. Your father built that company from nothing. We wanted to secure your future. And where is that better future, Mom? Oksana let out a bitter laugh. Where is it? I'm 55. No husband, no children, no grandchildren for you to dote on. Just a mother who never stops lecturing me. Don't you dare speak to me like that. Antonina Viktorovna shot up from her chair, her face pale and eyes blazing. Don't you dare. I'm your mother. And what does that change? Oksana stood too. Does that give you the right to control my life? You ruined it, Mom. You did. I'm not to blame. Antonina Viktorovna snapped. You lost track of time. No one forced you to slave away day and night. Other women manage to work and have families. Other women aren't carrying a multimillion-dollar business on their backs, Oksana shot back. Other women don't live with parents who think no one is good enough for their precious daughter. We just didn't want you to make a mistake. A mistake. Oksana let out a hysterical laugh. I already did, Mom. I made a mistake when I listened to you. Arthur now owns a chain of restaurants in 3 cities. Remember Maxim, Dad's old rival? He has 2 grown kids, a successful company, and a happy life. And here I am, alone. A heavy silence fell. Antonina Viktorovna sank back into her chair as if the strength had left her. You're being unfair, she said quietly. Your father and I worked our whole lives to give you the best education, the company, this house. I never wanted the company, Oksana shouted. I wanted to love and be loved. I wanted children. I wanted to wake up next to someone who held me, not a stack of documents. Then why did you agree to take over the company? Antonina Viktorovna challenged her daughter. No one forced you. No one forced me. Oksana felt the tears finally break through. Dad was in the hospital, begging me not to let the company fall apart. His whole life was in that business. And you cried every day, saying if I didn't take over, we'd lose everything, that Dad's life would be ruined. How could I say no? Antonina Viktorovna turned away to the window. Her shoulders trembled. I didn't know you felt this way, she whispered. Of course you didn't, Oksana replied wearily, wiping her tears. You never asked what I wanted. You always knew better. Oksana finished her wine and set the empty glass on the table. I need to sleep. I have an important meeting tomorrow. She headed for the kitchen door but stopped at the threshold without turning around. You were right about one thing, Mom. I lost time. But it wasn't just because of my choices. It happened because you and Dad never let me live my own life. Oksana went up to her room, closed the door, and leaned against it. The kitchen light was still on downstairs. She knew there was no convincing her mother. Antonina Viktorovna always believed she was right. Arguing or explaining was pointless. This fight, like dozens before it, would change nothing. Tomorrow morning, they'd speak coldly and stiffly, pretending nothing had happened. As always, Oksana woke with a heavy head and a bitter taste in her mouth. The wine last night hadn't been the best idea, especially before a big workday. She glanced at the clock, 7:008, ma time to get ready. Down in the kitchen, she found her mother wasn't there. Antonina Viktorovna usually rose early and was already at the table with coffee and a newspaper by now. Empty today. Probably upset after last night, Oksana thought as she poured herself coffee from the machine. Guilt gnawed at her, but she pushed it down. No time for family drama now. Ahead lay negotiations with new investors, and she had to prepare. She quickly ate breakfast, left a brief note for her mother on the table, "I'll be back late," and left for work. The office greeted her with its usual bustle. The secretary reported on incoming calls. Nikita Sergeyevich brought a folder of documents for an upcoming meeting. Oksana immersed herself in work, trying not to think about yesterday's argument. It was around 2 p.m. when her phone lit up with a call from Ludmila. Oksana frowned. The housekeeper, Ludmila, usually didn't bother her over trivial matters. "Yes, I'm listening," she answered, still skimming through documents. "Oksana Nikolaevna." Ludmila's voice sounded uneasy, almost frightened. "Antonina Viktorovna is missing." Oksana froze, not immediately processing what she'd heard. Missing? How? Her heart gave an unpleasant lurch. "I can't find her anywhere," Ludmila spoke quickly, stumbling over her words. "She wasn't in the kitchen this morning. I thought she was still asleep. But when she didn't come out by 10, I went to check. The bed's made, she's not in her room. I searched every room, the whole house, even the yard. I ran outside calling for her, but Antonina Viktorovna is nowhere." "Just what I needed," Oksana muttered. She stood abruptly, knocking over the folder of documents. Papers scattered across the floor, but she didn't care. "Ludmila, are you sure you checked everywhere?" "Absolutely. I even looked in the basement and the garage. Her phone is still on the nightstand. I'll be there soon." Oksana slammed the receiver down and pressed the intercom button. "Nikita, come in now." Her assistant appeared within seconds, likely sensing the urgency in her tone. "Yes, Oksana Nikolaevna." "Nikita, something's come up." She was already shoving papers into her bag, hands trembling slightly. "My mother's missing. I need to start searching immediately. Reschedule all my meetings." "Missing? How?" "I don't know," Oksana cut him off sharply. "The housekeeper says she hasn't been home since morning." Nikita Sergeyevich had worked with Oksana for 10 years. In that time, they'd become more than just boss and subordinate, almost friends. He saw the tension in her face and understood the gravity of the situation. "Oksana Nikolaevna, how can I help? Should I organize a search? Do you want me to come with you?" Oksana hesitated for a second but shook her head. "Not yet. If I need you, I'll call." She grabbed her bag, coat, and practically ran out of the office, leaving a bewildered Nikita standing in the middle of the room. On the way home, Oksana ran through every possible scenario in her head. Where could her mother be? Had she really been so hurt by yesterday's words that she decided to leave? But where? Slamming on the brakes at a traffic light, Oksana dialed Yelizaveta Vasilievna, her mother's longtime friend. "Hello," a cheerful woman's voice answered. "Yelizaveta Vasilievna, it's Oksana. Is Mom with you?" "No, Oksanaka." "What's wrong?" Wariness crept into the woman's tone. "No, everything's fine," Oksana lied, not wanting to raise the alarm prematurely. "Just wondering where she went." "Has she called you today?" "No, dear. Antonina and I spoke the day before yesterday. She invited me over for tea next week." "Is something wrong?" "No, no, everything's fine. Thank you." Oksana hung up and dialed the next number. Valentina Ivanovna, another friend of her mother's, didn't know anything either. In fact, she seemed surprised by the call. "Oksana, is Tony not at home?" "That's strange. We talked on the phone yesterday. She was planning to tend to the flowers in the greenhouse today. Said she hadn't looked after her roses in a while." "Thank you, Valentina Ivanovna. If she happens to call you, please let me know right away." "Of course, sweetheart." You're worrying me. Is Tony all right? Yes, we just missed each other, Oksana lied again and ended the call. Suddenly, it hit her, the cemetery. Her mother often went there, especially when she was upset or needed quiet. Maybe after yesterday's argument, she'd gone to visit her husband's grave. Oksana turned the car around and headed for the cemetery. The drive took 20 minutes, which felt like an eternity. Anxious thoughts swirled in her mind. What if her mother wasn't feeling well? What if something had happened to her? I shouldn't have spoken to her like that yesterday, Oksana thought bitterly. I shouldn't have lost my temper. She's 79. She has a weak heart. The cemetery greeted her with silence and the rustle of autumn leaves. Oksana nearly ran down the familiar paths to her father's grave. Her heels clicked against the asphalt, her breath uneven. The grave was well kept. Fresh flowers lay on the black marble. Her mother must have visited recently, but she wasn't here now. Oksana sank onto the bench beside the grave. Tears rolled down her cheeks. "Papa, how could she do this?" she whispered, staring at her father's photograph on the headstone. "Where could she have gone? I didn't mean to hurt her. I'm just tired. Tired of pretending everything's fine." Nikolai Petrovich gazed back sternly yet calmly from the photo. Oksana remembered how he could always soothe her with just a look, how he found the right words in difficult times. "What should I do?" she asked quietly. But of course, there was no answer. She sat for a few more minutes, wiped her tears, and stood. She needed to act, not sit and cry. On the way home, Oksana began calling hospitals. Her hands shook at the thought that her mother might have been in an accident or suffered a heart attack. "Good afternoon. Have you admitted any women around 79 today?" "Antonina Viktorovna Ivanova." "One moment, I'll check." "No, we don't have a patient by that name." She called 4 hospitals. Nothing. Next, she went to the police station. The officer on duty barely looked up, clearly preoccupied. "I'd like to report a missing person," Oksana said firmly. "Take a seat." "When did the person go missing?" "This morning. Or possibly last night. I'm not sure." The officer finally lifted his eyes to her. "This morning. You understand that by law we can only start searching after 24 hours since the disappearance, but she's 79. Oksana's voice trembled. "She has heart problems." "All right, let's file a report." The officer pulled out a form. Name and age of the missing person. Ivanova Antonina Viktorovna, 79. Description, a well-groomed woman. Oksana tried to recall every detail. Average height, around 165 centimeters, gray hair, usually tied in a bun. Brown eyes. Wears reading glasses. What was she wearing? I don't know. I left early in the morning, I didn't see her. Does she have any memory issues? A tendency to wander off? No, Oksana shook her head. No memory problems. She's always been sharp. Maybe there was a conflict. A reason she might have left. Oksana fell silent. Yesterday's argument flashed vividly in her mind. We had a disagreement last night. But that's no reason to disappear. Understood. The officer jotted something down. Leave your contact details. We'll look into it. But usually, in cases like this, people come back on their own. Maybe your mother just wants to teach you a lesson. Teach me a lesson. Oksana felt anger boiling inside. She's 79, not 17. Still, it happens, the officer replied calmly. Go home, wait. If she doesn't show up in 24 hours, we'll escalate the search. Oksana left the station feeling hollow and helpless. She returned home, where a worried Ludmila had already turned on all the lights, as if brightness alone could bring back the missing mistress. Anything? The maid asked hopefully. Nothing. Oksana walked into the living room and sank onto the sofa. Maybe she went to visit relatives. She has no close relatives besides me, Oksana replied wearily. Ludmila, are you sure you didn't notice anything unusual in her behavior lately? No, Oksana Nikolaevna. Antonina Viktorovna was her usual self. Though she did seem a bit pensive these past few days, but I didn't think much of it. Oksana took out her phone and started calling hospitals, morgues, and emergency rooms again. With each negative response, her panic grew. In the evening, Nikita called. Oksana Nikolaevna, any news? Has your mother been found? No. Oksana's voice was hollow. Nikita, cancel all my meetings for tomorrow too. I can't think about work when I don't know where my mother is. Of course. Maybe we should put out an alert or hire private investigators. Investigators? Yes, that's a good idea. I'll take care of it first thing tomorrow. Oksana didn't sleep all night. She sat in the armchair in the living room, wrapped in a blanket, staring at the phone, hoping it would ring, that her mother would call and say everything was fine, that she just needed some time alone. But the phone remained silent. The same thought kept spinning in her head, what if I never see her again? What if the last words we said to each other were full of anger and hurt? Oksana closed her eyes, and tears streamed down her cheeks again. For the first time in many years, she felt utterly helpless. She could control the company, close deals, solve problems. But how do you find someone who simply vanished? 3 days had passed since Antonina Viktorovna's disappearance, and Oksana felt like she was slowly losing her mind. The police were working on it, but without much enthusiasm. Too many missing people, too few resources. Every day she called the station, and every day she received the same answer. Investigative measures are underway. Wait. Oksana sat in her office, staring out the window at the gray autumn sky. The documents on her desk remained untouched. Her computer was on, but she couldn't bring herself to work. Every time she tried to focus on numbers and reports, her mother's face flashed before her eyes. The office door opened quietly, and Nikita stepped in with another stack of papers. Oksana Nikolaevna, you need to sign these. Nikita, Oksana interrupted, still gazing out the window. Do you know any good private investigators? Her assistant froze in the doorway. Private investigators? You want to hire someone privately? The police are moving too slowly. I need a professional who'll focus solely on this case. She finally turned to face him. Nikita noticed the dark circles under her eyes, the pallor of her face. Do you have any contacts? There's one person, Nikita nodded. Gleb Semyonovich Morozov. Used to work in criminal investigations, then went into private practice. Very thorough and reliable. My brother hired him a couple of years ago when he was tracking down a debtor. Found him in a week. I need him. Now, Oksana reached for her phone. Give me his number. Half an hour later, Gleb Semyonovich was sitting in her office. A man in his 50s with sharp gray eyes and calm, measured movements, he exuded trustworthiness. He pulled out a notepad and pen. Gleb Semyonovich, I need your help, Oksana began, trying to keep her voice steady, though it betrayed her with a tremor. My mother has been missing for 3 days. Tell me in detail. When did you last see her? The evening before she disappeared. We had an argument. It was hard for Oksana to admit it out loud. The next morning, I left early for work, didn't see her. Then, in the afternoon, the housekeeper called to say my mother wasn't home. What was the argument about? Oksana clenched her fists. I accused her of ruining my life. Said because of her, I had no family. It was stupid. I shouldn't have. Oksana Nikolaevna, the detective interrupted gently, I'm not here to judge you. I need facts to understand what might have happened. Your mother could have left in an emotional state. I don't know, Oksana ran a hand over her face. She was upset, that's certain. But to just disappear. She's 79. She has a heart condition. She has relatives, friends she could have turned to. I called everyone. No one's seen her. Her friends say she didn't call them. Gleb Semyonovich jotted down every word. Money, documents, what did she take with her? Nothing. Oksana felt a lump rising in her throat. Her passport was in place, her phone was at home, and so was her money. The maid said that Dottie hadn't taken her favorite purse. That's strange, the detective frowned. People planning to leave usually take their documents and money. Describe your mother to me in detail, her habits, the places she liked to visit. Oksana spent the next hour answering the detective's questions. She told him how her mother loved visiting her father's grave at the cemetery, how she sometimes met friends at a cafe, and how she always went to church on Tuesdays. I'll check all these places, promised Gleb Semyonovich. I'll also request surveillance footage from your neighborhood. Oksana Nikolaevna, I understand how difficult this is for you, but try to remember, was there anything unusual in your mother's behavior recently? Oksana thought for a moment. Ludmila, our maid, mentioned that Mom had been pensive these past few days, but I didn't pay much attention. We barely spoke. I'm always at work. All right. I'll start working immediately and keep you updated. The detective stood up. And one more thing, don't lose hope. In my experience, there have been cases where people were found after a month, even 2. When Gleb Semyonovich left, Oksana sank into a chair. She had hired the best detective. The police were working. Missing person posters were plastered all over the city. What else could she do? The following days turned into agonizing waiting. Gleb Semyonovich called every evening with updates, but there were no results. He had checked all the cafes and churches, questioned her mother's friends, and reviewed surveillance footage. Antonina Viktorovna had seemingly vanished into thin air. I've checked hospitals within a 100-kilometer radius, the detective said. I've also contacted colleagues in neighboring cities. Nothing. How can someone just disappear? Oksana nearly shouted into the phone. We live in the 21st century. There are cameras everywhere. Unfortunately, not everywhere. There aren't many cameras in your neighborhood. The last thing I managed to confirm is that your mother left the house early in the morning, around 6:008 ma. After that, the trail goes cold. Oksana kept going to work because she didn't know what else to do. Sitting at home and waiting was unbearable. But work brought no relief either. She held meetings, signed documents, met with partners, but it all felt like it was happening underwater, in some unreal fog. Oksana Nikolaevna, can you hear me? Her business partner's voice on the video call snapped her back to reality. Yes, sorry. What were you saying? About the delivery timeline. Do you agree with the proposed dates? Oksana looked at the screen, but the numbers and charts blurred before her eyes. Yes, agreed. Nikita will prepare the documents. When the call ended, she dropped her head into her hands. Her thoughts kept circling back to her mother. What if Antonina Viktorovna had left because of their fight? What if the last words Oksana had said to her were so cruel that her mother had decided to? Now she couldn't even think about that. Oksana Nikolaevna, Nikita came into the office with coffee. Drink this. You've barely eaten anything all week. Thank you. She took the cup but didn't even touch the drink. Any progress? Has anything moved forward? Nothing. Oksana's voice was lifeless. Gleb Semyonovich is working day and night, but there's nothing. I don't even know what to do anymore. Nikita perched on the edge of the desk. Maybe we should cancel the investor meeting or postpone it for a few weeks. You're not in the right state for such serious negotiations. Oksana jerked her head up. The investor meeting. She'd completely forgotten. It was the most important deal of the year, the future of the company depended on it. Right. The flight's today. Nikita, what time is it now? 2:30. And the flight's at 6:00, the assistant reminded her. So the flight's in 3 hours. Oksana clutched her head. God, I haven't even packed. Oksana Nikolaevna, Nikita said gently, I can go alone. Or we can reschedule. You don't have to. No. She stood abruptly. I'm no use here anyway. The detective's working, the police are working. I'm just in the way, calling every 2 hours. The deal is happening. It's too important for the company. But if anything happens, Ludmila will be at home. She'll let you know if your mother turns up. Oksana was already shoving documents into her bag. I'll leave all the contacts for her, and for Gleb Semyonovich too. Are you sure? Nikita watched her doubtfully. The negotiations could take weeks, maybe even months. I'm sure, Oksana said firmly, though inside, fear twisted her stomach. Leaving now, when her mother was missing, felt like betrayal. But the company, 200 people worked there, 200 families depended on her decisions. Nikita, call a car to the airport. I need to stop by the house to grab my things. All right. Then I'll see you at the airport. Yes, she nodded, and they exchanged tense glances. At home, Oksana hurriedly packed her suitcase while Ludmila fluttered around, helping fold clothes. Oksana Nikolaevna, what about Antonina Viktorovna? The housekeeper asked anxiously. Ludmila, I need to ask you something very important. Oksana stopped and took the woman's hands. If my mother shows up, if there's any news, call me immediately. Any time, day or night. Understood. Of course, of course. Don't worry, I'll call right away. Here's the detective's number, and here's the local precincts. Oksana scribbled on a piece of paper. If something happens and you can't reach me, call them. But you'll come back, won't you? Ludmila's voice held a plea. Of course I'll come back. 3 months at most. But even as she said it, Oksana felt her heart clench with pain. She called Gleb Semyonovich from the car on the way to the airport. Gleb Semyonovich, I have to leave for a 3-month business trip, but I'll be reachable 24/7. If you hear anything. Understood. Oksana Nikolaevna, don't worry. I'll keep searching. I still have a few leads to follow up on. What leads? She clutched the phone. It's too early to say. I don't want to give false hope. But I'm working on it. Rest assured. Oksana hurried across the airport parking lot, dragging her suitcase behind her. Nikita had already gone inside, but she'd lingered to answer an urgent call from Gleb Semyonovich. The conversation had been brief and fruitless, no new leads, no witnesses, nothing. Hanging up, she quickened her pace. Check-in was less than half an hour away, and she couldn't afford to be late. The investors wouldn't wait if she missed her flight. Near the terminal entrance, she noticed a woman, young, maybe 30, holding a child. They sat on a concrete barrier. Something about the scene made Oksana pause. The woman wore a tattered coat, clearly too big for her. Her hair was disheveled, but her face. Her face was strikingly beautiful, with delicate features and large hazel eyes. The baby in her arms, tiny and wrapped in a thin blanket, far too flimsy for autumn weather, shifted slightly. Oksana meant to walk past. She didn't have time. She needed to hurry. But something held her back. Maybe it was the woman's eyes, weary yet full of quiet dignity, or the way she cradled the child, trying to warm him with her own body. Excuse me, Oksana stepped closer. Are you all right? The woman flinched and looked up warily. Yes, I'm fine, she murmured, instinctively tightening her hold on the baby. "Forgive the intrusion, but, do you have somewhere to stay?" The woman hesitated, as if weighing whether to trust a stranger. Then she lowered her gaze. "Not yet. But we'll manage." Oksana studied the child, a boy, judging by the blue cap. He slept nestled against his mother's shoulder, no older than a year. Suddenly, a thought flashed through Oksana's mind: what if my mother is sitting somewhere like this, alone and helpless? What if someone walks past her just as indifferently as most people are walking past this woman now? "Listen," Oksana rummaged through her bag and pulled out a set of keys. "I have a cottage outside the city, about 40 kilometers from here. I'm leaving for a long trip, several months. It's empty. Would you like to stay there?" The woman stared at her with such disbelief, it was as if Oksana had offered her $1 million. "What, but, why? You don't even know me." "That matters." Oksana held out the keys. "You have a small child. He needs a roof over his head. I have that roof, and right now, it's just sitting unused. I can't just take this," the woman stammered, clearly overwhelmed. "It's too much." The baby stirred and let out a soft whimper. His mother rocked him gently, and Oksana noticed her hands trembling, from cold or exhaustion. "I'm leaving for 3 months for negotiations." "Stay at the cottage," Oksana repeated, extending the keys again. 3 months. The woman still hesitated to take the keys. "But why are you doing this?" Oksana paused. Indeed, why wasn't she used to spontaneous decisions, especially ones like this? Letting a stranger into my home, that was reckless. But something inside told her it was right. Because she hesitated. "Because my mother is missing right now, and I don't know where she is or if she's okay. And I want to believe that if she's somewhere in need of help, someone will be there to help her. Just like I'm helping you now." The woman slowly reached out and took the keys. Her eyes filled with tears. "Thank you," she whispered. "I don't even know what to say. My name is Christina. And this is Timothy." "Oksana," she introduced herself. "Listen, I have to run. I'm late for my flight. But I'll call my driver, he'll take you." She dialed Oleg, her regular driver. "Oleg, are you still in the parking lot?" "Yes, Oksana Nikolaevna." "Is something wrong?" "A woman with a small child will be coming out to the terminal entrance. Her name is Christina. Please take them to the dacha." "To the dacha?" Oleg's voice held surprise. "Yes," Oksana quickly dictated instructions. "And buy them everything they need. Groceries for now, clothes for the child. It's clear they have nothing, baby food, diapers, whatever else little ones need." "Got it, Oksana Nikolaevna. I'll pull up now." Oksana turned back to Christina. "They'll take you. The dacha has everything you need. Bedding is in the closet in the bedroom, dishes in the kitchen. The heating is electric. You'll figure it out." "I don't know how to thank you." Christina looked at her as if seeing an angel. "You've saved our lives." "Don't exaggerate." Oksana smiled, though her heart felt heavy. "I just helped." She had already turned to leave when Christina called after her. "Oksana, I hope they find your mother." "They will find her." Oksana nodded, unable to speak, and hurried into the terminal. At the check-in counter, Nikita was waiting nervously. "Oksana Nikolaevna, where were you?" "There are 3 minutes left before check-in closes." "Sorry, I got held up." She handed her documents to the attendant. While the luggage was being processed, Nikita studied her with a probing gaze. "Did something happen?" "No, well, yes. I just gave the keys to my dacha to a homeless woman with a child." Nikita froze. "You did what?" "I gave her the keys to the dacha," Oksana repeated calmly, taking her boarding pass. "They'll stay there while I'm gone." But Nikita was clearly searching for words. You're not afraid of letting strangers into your dacha. You don't even know her. What if she, I don't know, steals something or turns it into a den? Oksana stopped and looked at him. No, I'm not afraid. She's not at fault for how her life turned out. I'm sure she's a good person. How can you be so sure? Nikita shook his head. Oksana Nikolaevna, you've always been cautious in business, vetting every partner. And here I just felt that I needed to help, Oksana interrupted him. There was no lie in her eyes, Nikita, only exhaustion and fear. And that little boy, he was cold. How could I just walk past him? Nikita sighed. All right, I hope you're right. If only because I don't want to deal with the consequences if you're wrong. They passed through security and headed toward the boarding gate. The waiting area was crowded and noisy. Oksana sank into a chair, feeling exhaustion wash over her. The past week had drained her completely. You're worried about your mother, so you helped that woman, Nikita said quietly, sitting down beside her. I don't know, Oksana answered honestly. Maybe I just wanted to do something good. Maybe it's some form of atonement. Atonement? For what? For being a bad daughter. For the last words I said to my mom being cruel. For flying away now instead of staying and searching for her. You're not a bad daughter. Nikita shook his head. You're doing what you have to. Have to. Oksana gave a bitter smile. I've spent my whole life doing what I have to. And here's the result, my mother's missing. I have no family, just endless work. The boarding announcement came. They stood and headed for the gate. In line, Oksana checked her phone again, no messages from Ludmila or the detective. On the plane, she settled by the window. Nikita sat beside her and pulled out his laptop. Let's go over the presentation one more time, he suggested. Sure, Oksana nodded, though she had no desire to think about work. For the next hour, they discussed the project that was supposed to take their company to the next level. Nikita pointed to charts and calculations, explaining the strategy, while Oksana nodded and took notes, but her thoughts were far away. The plane took off, and Oksana pressed her forehead against the cold window. Below her, the city shrank away, somewhere down there was her mother. Or maybe she wasn't. With each passing day, hope dwindled. Oksana Nikolaevna, Nikita called to her. Are you listening? Sorry, she murmured. I asked when we should contact Oleg. I want to make sure he got that woman home safely. Good idea. Oksana dialed the driver's number. Oleg, how did it go? Everything's fine. I took Christina and the little one to the dacha, helped them settle in. Then we went to the supermarket, got groceries, clothes for the baby. The woman cried from gratitude. Thank you, Oleg. I'll transfer the money for the purchases. Don't mention it. By the way, she's a good woman, refined. Told me a bit about herself. She has a higher education, worked as an accountant, but her husband turned out to be a tyrant. She had to run. I see. Oksana felt reassured, she hadn't been wrong in her impulse. Oleg, keep an eye on them, please. If they need anything, help them. Of course. Hanging up, Oksana leaned back in her seat. Nikita watched her curiously. Well? Satisfied? Yes, Oksana smiled. You know, even in such a difficult time, it's nice to realize you were able to help someone. That's noble, Nikita agreed. Though still reckless. Every evening while at the hotel, Oksana called home. Ludmila always answered on the first ring, as if she never let go of the phone. Ludmila, any news? No. Oksana Nikolaevna. Nothing at all. Did the detective call? Yes, this morning. He said he's checking some new lead, but nothing concrete yet. The police haven't found anything either. Sorry, Oksana Nikolaevna, it's not your fault, Oksana said wearily. Thanks for keeping me updated. The negotiations were grueling. The investors nitpicked every figure, demanded additional guarantees, and set new conditions. Oksana operated on autopilot, mechanically answering questions and countering arguments. Nikita did his best to support her, but even he could see she was barely holding on. Oksana Nikolaevna, you were brilliant today, he said after another round of talks. You managed to convince them to lower the interest rate? Yes, she replied indifferently, checking her phone. No messages. The chances that Antonina Viktorovna was safe dwindled with each passing day. Oksana knew the statistics: the longer someone is missing, the less likely they'll be found alive and unharmed. It made her sick to her stomach. But she had to pull herself together, smile for the investors, negotiate contract terms, and pretend everything was under control. At night, she lay in her hotel room, staring at the ceiling, replaying her last conversation with her mother, every word, every inflection. And with each day, the weight of guilt grew heavier. 6 months. Half a year spent on what should have been the most important negotiations in her company's history. The investors were so demanding and cautious that each contract clause took weeks to finalize. Initially, it was supposed to take 3 months, but the talks dragged on, new conditions emerged, and additional meetings with partners in other cities were required. Now, finally, the plane had landed in her hometown, and Oksana and Nikita walked through the airport terminal with their suitcases. The deal was done. Contracts signed. The company had secured the investments needed to expand and enter the international market. It was a victory. But Oksana felt no joy. Oksana Nikolaevna, you were amazing, Nikita said beside her, his enthusiasm evident. You pulled it off. Honestly, there were moments I thought they'd walk away. But you changed their minds. That was your doing too, Nikita. Oksana managed a tired smile and patted her assistant on the shoulder. You helped me sway them, especially when it came to the return on investment timeline. Without your calculations, we never would have convinced them. Team effort, Nikita replied modestly. We're a team. By the way, are you heading home or to the dacha now? Oksana stopped dead in her tracks. The dacha, she had completely forgotten about it these past months. Exactly. I forgot I had guests staying there, she said with a shrug and a smile. I wonder how they're doing. Oleg mentioned a couple of times that everything was fine. Maybe you should go home and rest first. Nikita suggested. No, Oksana shook her head firmly. I'm going to the dacha. I want to make sure everything's all right and get to know Christina better. After all, she's been living in my house for 6 months, and I've barely spoken to her. They said goodbye at the exit. Nikita took a taxi, while Oksana called Oleg. The driver arrived 20 minutes later, beaming. Oksana Nikolaevna, I'm so happy to see you. How did the negotiations go? Successfully, Oleg. I'm tired, of course, but it was worth it. Let's go to the dacha. The dacha? Not home. No, I want to check on things there. By the way, how's Christina? And the little one? Oh, everything's great. Oleg perked up. Christina is such a wonderful woman, hardworking, tidy. The house is always in order. And she even found a job at the local store. Timosha is growing like a weed, he's already started walking. He's walking already? Oksana was surprised. How old was he when I left? 10 or 11 months. Now he's a year and 5 months. A sharp little boy. They pulled onto the highway. Familiar landscapes flashed by the window. The city gradually gave way to suburbs, then fields and forests. Oksana stared out the window, thinking about her mother. Over the past 6 months, the trail had gone completely cold. Gleb Semyonovich had kept working for the first 3 months but eventually admitted he'd hit a dead end. The police hadn't found anything either. The case of Antonina Viktorovna's disappearance was slowly being shelved. Oksana had learned to live with the pain. She no longer cried every night or flinched at every phone call. She had simply accepted it as fact. Her mother was gone, and most likely, she would never see her again. The thought was unbearable, but she had to live with it. The dacha was in a picturesque spot, surrounded by pine trees. A two-story house with a large veranda and a well-kept garden. Her father had bought the place long ago, when Oksana was still a teenager. They had spent summers here, celebrated family holidays here. After her father's death, Oksana had rarely come back, too many memories. The car turned onto the familiar dirt road. A few minutes later, the house came into view, and Oksana immediately noticed something had changed. Flowers bloomed in the beds, the gate had been freshly painted, and new curtains hung in the windows. The place looked lived in, cozy. See? Oleg said proudly. Christina really does take good care of the house. They got out of the car. Oksana looked around. Even the paths had been swept, the grass trimmed. She headed toward the house when suddenly, she heard a child's laughter coming from the garden. Rounding the house, Oksana walked toward the gazebo at the edge of the property, near a small pond. And what she saw made her freeze in place. In the gazebo, in a wicker chair, sat an elderly woman in a light dress. On her lap was a little boy with dark curls, and the woman was telling him something, pointing at the ducks swimming in the pond. The child laughed and clapped his hands. Oksana felt the ground give way beneath her feet. She recognized that woman. She'd have recognized her among thousands of others. Mom. The word came out hoarse, barely audible. The woman lifted her head and looked at Oksana. Her face was achingly familiar, the same brown eyes, the same delicate nose, the same thin lips. But there was no recognition in her gaze. Only mild curiosity. What? Antonina Viktorovna tilted her head. Did you say something? We know each other. You said, Mom. Oksana took a step forward. Then another. Her legs felt weak, her heart pounding wildly. Mom, it's me. Oksana, your daughter. Antonina Viktorovna studied her carefully, as if trying to remember. Then she slowly shook her head. I'm sorry, but I don't know you. You must be mistaken. Mom. Oksana exhaled sharply, unable to comprehend what was happening. 6 months of searching. 6 months of despair and hope. And all this time, her mother had been here, at the dacha. Just 50 kilometers from home. At that moment, Christina stepped out of the house, carrying a large pot. Spotting Oksana, she smiled. Oh, you're back. Welcome home. She set the pot down on the table in the gazebo. Will you join us for lunch? I just made soup. Christina, Oksana pointed a trembling hand at her mother. This woman. Where did she come from? Oh, Antonina Viktorovna. Christina glanced at the older woman with tenderness. She's been living with us for months now. Why? The little boy in Antonina Viktorovna's lap waved at Oksana. Oksana stepped closer, her voice shaking. This is my mother. Antonina Viktorovna, she's my mother. Christina froze, the pot nearly slipping from her hands. Wait, this is your mom. She looked back and forth between Oksana and Antonina Viktorovna in disbelief. Oh my God, I had no idea. She just showed up and disappeared half a year ago. Oksana spoke in a rush, tears already streaming down her cheeks. The police searched. I hired a private investigator. No one could find her. I was so scared, I thought I'd lost her forever. Christina sank onto the bench as if her legs had given out. Christina, please. Oksana grabbed her hands. Tell me how she ended up here. Okay. Christina nodded. Sit down. I'll explain everything. She turned to Antonina Viktorovna. Tanya, sweetheart, can you play with Timosha a little longer? Of course. Antonina Viktorovna smiled at the child. We'll go feed the ducks. Yes, sunshine. Oksana sat across from Christina, her hands trembling so badly she clenched them into fists to steady herself. Tell me everything. From the beginning. It was a few days after you gave us the keys, Christina began. I remember exactly, for days had passed. Timosha and I went for a walk by the river. There's a beautiful spot nearby where you can sit by the shore. And then suddenly, I saw her. Where exactly? Oksana interrupted, by the bridge. She was standing in the middle of the road, looking completely lost. At first, I thought to walk past, but she seemed so frightened. So I went up and asked if she needed help. She looked at me with these empty eyes and asked, where is the house? I'm looking for the house. Oksana listened without breathing. I asked which house. She named the street and number. That street. That house. Christina pointed to the dacha. I was in shock. I said, but I live in that house. Come, I'll take you there. We brought her here, and she burst into tears. Oksana entered the house, looked around, and started crying. She kept saying, I know this place. I've been here. We were here with Kolya. She repeated that name over and over. Nikolai Kolya. She said she missed him, that she wanted to see him. Nikolai is my father, Oksana said quietly. He died when I was 25, 30 years ago. You see? Christina nodded. She's living in the past. She remembers her husband, remembers her youth. But everything that happened after his death, she doesn't remember any of it. Oksana looked at her mother, who was cheerfully talking to the little boy. Completely. I tried to ask her about her family, about the house. She described the apartment where she lived with her husband. She described her job. She was a teacher, right? But about you, about having a daughter, nothing. As if it never happened. She needs to see a doctor, Oksana wiped her tears. Urgently. This is memory loss. Maybe it's trauma. Maybe she fell. Hit her head. I took her to a doctor, Christina said. A week after I found her, to the local GP. He said she needed tests, but Antonina Viktorovna refused. She was afraid of hospitals. I couldn't force her. It's fine. I'll find a good doctor, Oksana was already making plans. We'll do all the tests, find out what happened to her. They sat in silence for a few minutes. Oksana couldn't take her eyes off her mother. Antonina Viktorovna held Timofey in her arms, showing him how to toss breadcrumbs to the ducks. The little boy laughed. And her mother smiled, such a soft, happy smile. So, all this time, she's been living here with you? Oksana finally asked. Yes, Christina nodded. I couldn't leave her alone, you understand. She was so lost, so helpless. I decided I'd stay with her until someone from her family was found. I didn't know she was your mother. And how did you live? On what? Oksana remembered what Oleg had said about work. I found a job at a store. Here, in the village, not far from here. The owner, a wonderful man, let me bring Timosha with me. The pay isn't much, but it was enough for us. Antonina Viktorovna helped around the house, cooking, cleaning. She's an amazing cook, by the way. Christina smiled. And she looked after Timosha while I was at work. He got so attached to her. Calls her grandma. Grandma, Oksana repeated. Another wave of tears rose in her throat. She doesn't remember her own daughter, but she takes care of someone else's child. Oksana leaned forward. I don't know what to say. I'm so sorry. If I'd known she was your mother, I would have contacted you right away. You're not to blame, Oksana shook her head. You saved her. You gave her shelter, took care of her. Christina, thank you so much, for not abandoning my mother, for looking after her all these months. Thank you for this. Tears welled up in Christina's eyes. You took me and Timosha in when we had absolutely nothing. You didn't even know us, but you helped. And I just couldn't abandon an elderly woman who needed help. They embraced, both crying from relief, from happiness, from everything they'd been through these past months. Christina pulled back slightly. It's none of my business, and you don't have to answer if you don't want to. But how did you end up on the street with a child? What happened? Christina wiped her tears and took a deep breath. I was married to a wealthy man, Vladimir. We met when I worked at his company. He was charming, generous, courted me beautifully. I fell in love. She paused, her gaze distant. The wedding was lavish. He bought me an apartment, a car, clothes. I thought it was love. But after Timosha was born, everything changed. He grew jealous of the baby. Said I gave him too much attention, then he started hitting me. Oh God, Oksana whispered. At first, rarely. Then more and more often. Christina's voice trembled. He controlled my every move. I couldn't leave the house without his permission, couldn't call friends. My parents were dead. My brother lives abroad. I was completely alone, and terrified he'd kill me or, worse, do something to Timosha. She wiped fresh tears away. I saved money bit by bit. Hid it. For 6 months. When I had enough for a bus ticket, I ran. Just took Timosha and left while he was at work. Went to the station and boarded the first bus leaving. Didn't even know where it was headed. Just went. Wherever my eyes led me. And then I met you. Is he looking for you? Oksana asked. I don't know, probably the shop owner hired me off the books so Vladimir couldn't trace me through databases. Oksana was quiet for a moment. You know, Christina. Let's switch to you, informal. After everything we've been through, it feels right. Christina smiled. Okay. I have a proposal. Oksana met her eyes. I want to offer you a job at my company, properly contracted, fair salary. You mentioned you worked as an accountant. Yes, but you saved my mother. Cared for her when I didn't even know where she was. I should be thanking you. Oksana's voice softened. And I want to take you all home. My mother, you, Timofey. I have a big house, there's room for everyone. Timofey will have a better life in the city. More opportunities. Good doctors. Kindergarten. Oksana, Christina stared at her in disbelief. This is too much. You've already done so much for us. It's not too much. It's right, Oksana said firmly. Mama will be with me. You'll work. We'll hire a nanny for Timofey while you're at your job. And when he's older, kindergarten. Everything in its place. All together. Like a family, Christina repeated softly. Tears streamed down her cheeks again. I've dreamed of a real family for so long. They all had lunch together at a large table in the gazebo. Antonina Viktorovna shared stories about her youth, how she met Nikolai, how they traveled to the south for their honeymoon. She spoke vividly, with a smile, and it seemed as if she had truly returned to that happy time. Oksana listened and cried, trying to do so discreetly. Her mother was alive, right there beside her. And yet, at the same time, she wasn't. The woman sitting across from her didn't remember her, didn't recognize her. It was both happiness and tragedy at once. The next day, Oksana called the best neurologist in the city to the dacha. The doctor conducted an examination, asked numerous questions, and ordered tests and scans. Judging by the symptoms, your mother suffered a minor heart attack, he told Oksana privately. It most likely happened at the moment of her disappearance or shortly before. A minor heart attack can be almost symptomless. Sometimes, a person doesn't even realize what has happened. But the consequences can be serious. In your mother's case, the areas of the brain responsible for long-term memory were affected. So she'll never remember me? Oksana's voice trembled. I can't say for certain. The brain is a complex system. Sometimes memory returns partially or even fully. Other times, it doesn't. It will take time, rehabilitation, and support from loved ones. I'll prescribe treatment, vitamins, nootropics. Most importantly, surround her with familiar things, photographs, stories. It might help. A week later, they moved to the city house. Oksana gave Christina and Timofey a separate room on the second floor. She hired a nanny for Timofey and arranged for Christina to work in the company as an accountant. Christina turned out to be an excellent employee, attentive, responsible, and quick to learn. Nikita, who had initially been wary of her, admitted within a month that it had been the right decision. While Christina worked, Timofey stayed at home with the nanny and Antonina Viktorovna. The elderly woman grew attached to the boy and cared for him with such tenderness that the nanny often joked, "I don't even have anything to do here, Antonina Viktorovna does everything herself." Slowly, very gradually, her memory began to return. First, Antonina Viktorovna remembered her friend Elizaveta Vasilievna, then the address of the house where she had lived with her daughter. And then, she remembered Oksana herself. It happened 3 months after the move. Oksana came home from work, and her mother greeted her at the door with a smile. "Oksanaka, my dear," she said simply. "How I've missed you." And they embraced, both crying with happiness. Antonina Viktorovna didn't remember the details of the last 30 years, but she remembered the most important thing, that she had a daughter whom she loved. Now, they all lived together in the big house. Christina worked and gradually grew more confident. Timofey was a healthy, happy little boy. Antonina Viktorovna continued to recover and remembered something new each day. For the first time in many years, Oksana felt she had a real family, not one dictated by obligation and duty, but one built on love and mutual support.